Welcome to the Chinese timeline of the Cold War, specifically focused on the journey following
Mao Zedong
group, the Chinese Communist Party, or the CCP. The CCP was founded as a political party and a revolutionary movement in 1921 by revolutionaries
李大嫂
and
成都手
coming out of the May 4th movement, an intellectual and socio-political revolution between 1917 to 1921 led the two to discuss the theories of Marxism. Inspired by the Russian Revolution and the interpretation done by Lenin, mobilizing the masses against the oppressors and rulers was a constant inspiration for Mao. The Leninist interpretation stressed that it was possible to revolutionize a mainly agrarian country and that the focus should be on strict party leadership. The October Revolution was, you could say, one of the few things that most people in China's Communist Party could agree on. Shortly after the creation of the CCP, many of the group's leaders sparked labor unions and joined hands with the Nationalist Party KMT. The alliance between the two, while successful at first, ended in a violent break-off, with the CCP being kicked out of Shanghai. Mao and the remnants of his forces escaped in a long march from the years 1934 to 35. To Yan'an in northern China. The 6,000-mile trek of the Chinese Communists resulted in the relocation of the Communist Revolutionary Base from southeastern to northwestern China, and in the emergence of Mao as the undisputed party leader.
The formation of the PRC was official in 1949. However, the chains of events begins all the way back to 1931 with the Japanese invasion of Manchuria. This event forced the CCP and the KMT to take a pause on the Civil War and attack the Japanese together. However, right after the peace talks broke, the Chinese Civil War continued again. With the CCP's promised program of radical land reform of giving back to the poor and allowing the middle class to flourish, providing land reform, improved living conditions, and a voice for the marginalized rural masses, the CCP was able to gain social recognition and begin to win open battles against the KMT. Between 1948 to 1949, the People's Liberation Army, or the PLA, would win 3 major campaigns and force Chiang Kai, or the KMT, to Taiwan, where he continued to rule. Now we move on to the 1950s. After the Chinese Communist Party was created, the Speaking Bitterness, or the denunciation meetings, redistributed land to the poor and the middle class, allowing the middle class to flourish, and the poor to regain their rights and let out their anger. However, with this promised program, the CCP did not account for the decades of built-up resentment towards many of the landlords, which is why many of these meetings became violent and led to executions and many deaths and beatings of these landlords. Now we move on to the often forgotten, darker times of China's Cold War experience, the Cultural Revolution of 1966. As a social-political upheaval created by Mao Zedong, 2 million people part of original traditions in China were killed, and China was shaped into what it is today. Urged by the desire of a purely communist society, Mao convinced children to even turn against their parents, killing capitalists and nationalists, such as landowners, shopkeepers, and even artists, farmers, and university professors. Everyone was urged by the Chinese Communist Party to commit public denunciations and demolitions of traditional heritage, which inevitably forced sons and daughters into executing and assaulting their parents and grandparents for knowing people who owned land or owned it themselves. Zhang Hongbing, a former Red Guard, says today, "What I did to my mother was worse even than to an animal." A vice principal was beaten to death, and teachers were threatened for advising the students to focus on their studies rather than the revolution. Even today, policies from the Cultural Revolution have continued, with high surveillance and reporting culture for Xi Jinping citizens. Only when Mao Zedong died in 1976 did the Cultural Revolution end, and in 1980, diplomatic ties were created with the United States and relations with the Soviet Union were improved. But the deep scar and generational betrayal that the Cultural Revolution left behind still stings Chinese people to this day.
Going into post-Cold War, Tiananmen Square, a central location in Beijing, is a significant historical and political site in China. The pro-democracy protests of 1989, known as the June 4th incident, were sparked by the death of Hu Yaobang, a reformist figure within the Communist Party. The protests, which began as a small-scale demonstration, grew into a mass movement, drawing support from various sectors of Chinese society. However, the Chinese government, led by Deng Xiaoping, viewed the protests as a threat to its authority and stability. On May 20, 1989, martial law was declared in Beijing and the military forcibly cleared Tiananmen Square, resulting in a violent crackdown. The government's response was marked by censorship, propaganda, and suppression of dissent. The memory of the Tiananmen Square protests remain a sensitive and taboo subject in China, serving as a reminder of the ongoing struggle for democracy and human rights.
On May 7, 1999, during the NATO bombing campaign in Yugoslavia, the Chinese embassy in Belgrade was mistakenly hit by a NATO B-2 stealth bomber, resulting in the deaths of 3 Chinese journalists and injuring over 20 people. The incident caused significant diplomatic tensions between the United States and China, as China condemned the bombing as a breach of international law and violation of Chinese sovereignty. The incident strained relations between the two countries, leading to diplomatic efforts to ease tensions. The US and NATO expressed regret over the incident, stating it was accidental. The incident also increased skepticism about NATO's precision intelligence during military operations, and influenced China's stance on foreign military interventions. NATO faced criticism and scrutiny over its operational procedures and intelligence accuracy, leading to the reevaluation of its protocols to prevent similar instances in the future. Despite official explanations, conspiracy theories emerged suggesting the bombing was intentional, targeting to spy on China's activities or as a message to China.
By January of 2007, U.S.-China relations worsened as rumors spread about the Chinese test launching a missile in space, destroying an old satellite. Tibet saw a resulting month-long anti-China protest, and that was only 5 months before the Beijing Olympics were to be held. China, however, had reason to backlash at the U.S. later on in 2015, when a U.S. naval vessel sailed within the vicinity of Beijing's artificial reefs in the Spratly Islands. Especially considering the ongoing situation in the South China Sea, as well as the international dispute about China's rapid nuclear exploration, high tensions between the U.S. and China are certainly not wanted, but that seems to be where our countries are headed. Even with the end of the Cold War, China's foreign relations still remain tense. With continuous naval pushes around the Spratly Islands, as well as discussions on limiting nuclear development, China and the rest of the world is hoping that another unspoken Cold War isn't going to become a new facade of world peace. So there you have it, the oversimplified history of China, China, during the Cold War. This video has been edited by Maggie, animated by Kate, narrated by everyone, scripted by Kendall and Catilia, and as always, sponsored by Pringle.